Ew, gotta get rid of this old Backstreet Boys t-shirt.
Tell me why.
Because it stinks, boys.
Tell me why.
I've washed it so many times, but the odor won't come out.
Tell me why.
No, you tell me why I can't get rid of this odor.
Have you tried Downy Rinse and Refresh? It doesn't just cover up odors, it helps remove them.
Wow, it worked, guys.
Yeah.
Downy Rinse and Refresh removes more odor in one wash than the leading value detergent in 3 washes. Find it wherever you buy laundry products.
This is a More Than Just podcast production.
Welcome to this podcast, Season 4, Episode 28. My name is Tim Mitra. I am in Toronto, Ontario, and I'm joined once again by Jonathan Kuline over there in Mississauga, Ontario.
Hello there, kids.
We also have Jaime Lopez Jr. in Seattle, Washington.
How's it going?
Alrighty. It's going good. Thanks for asking. Alrighty, so we'll start off with some fact check. Frank Welker is the voice of Scooby-Doo and also Fred Jones, and I think he's been doing it since the 70s, right? Because he's a pretty old looking guy. So I saw that. I actually was watching a thing called Scooby-Doo, Where Are You Now?, which was a 2021 television special that I stumbled across on, I think on YTV or something like that. And we were just talking about Scooby-Doo, so I just thought I'd watch it for a bit while something was happening. And Kate Mininsky, how do you say her name?
Michucci?
Thank you. Kate Micucci also voices Velma Dinkley. We talked about Velma last week. And isn't she part of she's a comedy troupe with somebody named Garfunkel, right?
Yeah, she's in Garfunkel and Oates. That's Ricky Lindholm is her partner. They're both, American. But yeah, they're great. They're very funny. They have a Netflix special that's worth checking out if you get a chance.
I got confused about that. So there's not an N in there. It's Micucci, which she made fun of on...
and Conan or something.
O'Brien. Yeah. Playing with Micucci is the name of her.
That's her special
or something. Yeah.
Well, there's no N in the spelling, you mean? It's spelled wrong.
No, I just looked it up.
Micucci, yeah. Yeah, she was on Scrubs. She's been on a bunch of different things. She was on Easy on Netflix. That was really good. Yeah, she's a good actress.
She was one of the girlfriends on Big Bang Theory. She was Rob's girlfriend for a while.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Oh, yeah, Frank Welker. So he was the original Fred. He's been Fred since the 1960s, but he's had an incredibly prolific voice acting career. He was Megatron and Galvatron and Soundwave in the original Transformers. He's gone on to do all kinds. He was Garfield on the Garfield Show. He's done all kinds of voices. Astro on the Jetsons. He's done all kinds of very famous roles. He was on the Smurfs. This is from Wikipedia, so take it with a grain of salt, one of the most prolific voice actors of all time with worldwide box office gross of $17.4 billion, the third highest grossing actor of all time.
Wow.
Because he's
the voice. He's that voice that I would have remembered from the 70s cartoons of all the sort of, like the Megatron guys you just mentioned.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he was prolific. He was, when they were doing a voice recording, he was probably involved in it from like 1969 to about now. So
is that like Hanna-Barbera kind of stuff?
He did, it says 860 film, television, and video game credits. So, yeah, he's like one of the guys. All-timer.
He has his own IMDb database,
voice.
Right?
Yeah.
Cool. Alrighty.
Super Friends, Dynomutt, Jabberjaw, Flintstones comedy show. Yeah, you name it.
But has he done any Star Wars?
I don't think so. I don't see that on his long-ass list here.
Well, then he's not all that great, is he? Alrighty.
I'll probably never be able to find the meme, but I can find the original photo or the original GIF. One sec. Talking about Frank Welker as Megatron. So, because we're recording this in January of 2022, the Omicron variant of COVID-19 is the big news. So somebody had tweeted out this, and I can't find it anymore, a meme of Omicron being removed and replaced by Megatron for the next variant. And
really?
For this meme, apparently there's a scene in the old 1984 Transformers animated cartoon where the Lincoln Memorial... wait, is it the Lincoln Memorial? Oh, I should know this. A statue of Lincoln, the very famous one where he's sitting on the...
That's the Lincoln Memorial for those of you driving at home.
I think the Lincoln Memorial is the place where the statue is.
Yeah, it's not the actual statue.
Yeah, it's not the actual statue, but it's the the thing that everybody thinks of when they think of the Lincoln Memorial. And
hey, wait, you guys still have pennies there, right?
Oh yeah, we still have pennies. Mm-hmm.
So, when you look at the Lincoln Memorial on the U.S. penny, if you look really close, you can see the Lincoln statue.
Yeah.
Is that one of those things like being able to see the owl in the dollar bill?
No, you can see there's like a little impression of a head and a little impression of a body. You didn't know that about your own penny?
I guess I never looked that closely at it. I do remember the little owl thing that you can see in the dollar bill.
Podcast is over.
But nevertheless, finishing this up, you have the Lincoln statue on the big dais or throne there that gets removed by Megatron, and he just goes and sits on it because he's big enough to sit there like a big boy.
Oh, I see. Right. Yeah. Cool. Neat. Yeah. My one regret is the last time I was in Washington, I was walking around and I wanted to go see the Lincoln Memorial, but it was so crowded. Like, it was so many people walking up and down the stairs, right? And we just didn't have time. We had to go catch a bus, and too bad, so sad. And unfortunately, I tried to go to the White House, and that's where we killed the time. And it was what a waste that was, trying to go and see Trump's White House, but because you couldn't get within like football fields away from it, right? Like, that's how far they had it blocked off. Like, that's how secure they felt about that guy. Anyway,
so real-time follow-up. I am looking at in this case, a photo of a penny, and Tim's right. You know why we don't notice these? Because even though I've had these, available to me all 40 years of my life, is that these are the kind of things that American children take to theme parks, let's say like Disney World or SeaWorld or something, and
you squish them?
Exactly. You squish them into like a Mickey Mouse face or a dolphin or something. You run it through those little cranks.
Yeah. Sure.
I was really worried you were going to go into and throw them off the top of roller coasters at people.
Oh man, or rounding it up the Empire State Building and stuff. Yeah.
In Seattle, you can just go to the Space Needle and throw them off.
There you go.
All right. You have the coolest. Have you been to Seattle, John?
Yeah.
They have the coolest like subway rail thing that I guess from the World's Fair there. Like, it looks very sort of Art Deco kind of.
The monorail. It's not a subway. It's elevated.
Yeah, a monorail. Yeah.
Yep.
What do they call it?
They call it the monorail, like from the Simpsons episode.
I was going to say, please sing for us, Jaime. Please.
I wish I remember the three parts.
Monorail.
It's like
monorail.
It put them on the map of those cities that nobody had ever heard of.
North Haverbrook and Ogdenville.
Yeah.
What, they have monorails?
Yeah.
Right. They had monorails at Expo too. I remember those, riding on those.
Yeah.
And cool. All right. So last week I mentioned that from the Center Seat show I was watching, hosted by Gates McFadden, that stay tuned, folks. But so I talked about how Gene Roddenberry was sort of removed from the show at one point. From the shows, I should say, like Next Generation and stuff, because he was just being weird. But apparently Rod Roddenberry, his son, is an executive producer on shows like Prodigy and a few other things. So the Roddenberry family is still very much involved in the current iterations of Prodigy. And after Gene Roddenberry, Rick Berman took over, and so a lot of the shows that were done that we all love, Voy and Deep Space Nine and Enterprise. I think Enterprise was sort of the end of the. I think Rick Berman says on the show that was the end of the Rick Berman period, right? So he had a term for it, but I can't remember what it was. Anyway, throw over to Jaime for a bit of follow-up while I go look for another link.
Yeah, so we've been talking for a while about what is that Darnell stardate for Star Trek Prodigy, and the most recent episode was certainly threw some extra weird stuff in there. And of course, we've seen the other thing where we said, wait, is it like 17 years difference? What's going on? We've got some links here from Aaron Waltke, who's co-executive producer on Star Trek Prodigy. First one of the tweets says that fun Star Trek fact in today's Prodigy episode, which was actually last week's time of month, the crew encounters a tachyon storm that distorts time itself. Quote, the first hint of trouble is Hollow Janeway's opening log. The stardate is off as her temporal settings are affected by the approaching anomaly.
There you go.
So that's the first one there. So we got confirmation that it wasn't the writers don't know what they're doing. The fandom is destroyed. This is actually intentional.
Makes sense.
And then the follow-up tweet from that in the thread is, for those curious what the actual stardate is, you'll get one in the finale, don't worry. little unclear if that's the sort of mid-season finale, or if that's going to be like the
series
season finale, or series finale. It's like, which finale, bro? Oh, okay. Actually, there's actually a follow-up that I didn't see when I copied this link. Somebody asks, episode 10 or the full season finale? And he says, episode 10. So there you go. You heard it here.
There you go.
So next week, we'll find out.
Hooray!
Okay. Yeah, you huzzah!
And then people can figure out precisely how old Chakotay is, at least at a minimum, from the video that we saw, the recording that we saw of him.
Now let's head into the headlines. Oh, Jonathan does have a headline here. So
I do.
You go, John.
I do. Yeah, so we got a nice surprise this week. We got a more robust trailer for Star Trek Picard as opposed to the teaser I think we kind of got before. So we get a little bit more of a look inside the season, some of the sort of where things are going. It doesn't really change things from my perspective. Basic premise seems to be that Q messes with reality, not just time, but messes with reality for the quote-unquote path not taken. So clearly he makes some small change that ripples through and changes reality. At which point, of course, the knee-jerk reaction of any captain in Star Trek is to catapult around the sun, go back in time to the year 2024, because you couldn't go back to 2016. That would be ridiculous. And I love that they're going to 2024, so they're not in 2022 have to wear masks. That made me laugh. So they're going to 2024, and they're going to go and try and solve this crisis by going back in time and setting things right.
They're going to solve COVID?
Yeah, I mean, clearly it's great to know that by 2024 COVID won't be around. So it's nice that they've put a cap on that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Well, they would know. They're in the future, right?
It's true. It's true. Yeah, no, it's funny because, traditionally Star Trek, when they do a timey-wimey episode, they go to whatever year we're currently in, just so that obviously there's no incongruities. But this one, they decided to jump forward a couple of years because they're like, yeah, nobody wants to go to 2022. So yeah, I mean, lots of little clips, a little bit more John Delancey as Q, a little bit more inside of each of the characters, but very briefly. And yeah, what did you guys make of this slightly more in-depth trailer?
Well, I thought the iPhone 16 looked really cool.
Yeah, I can't believe
is
it
this
had
the one with
6G.
Guinan in
I can't
it?
believe
Is that
it.
a spoiler? Is that the one with Guinan? Is that a spoiler?
Yes, Guinan is in this one. That's I guess. And again, I think we had talked about her wanting to be on the show and that she was going to be on the show. So,
or she wanted to be on the show.
Yeah. When they announced Picard was coming back, she said like, "Oh, I'd love to be on the show," and they were like, "Okay." So then Patrick Stewart went on whatever show she's on and said, "Hey, do you want to be on the show?" And she said yes. So we knew that was coming. We talked about that I think a year plus ago. But now, obviously, we now have seen she's there, looking eerily ageless. It's kind of odd.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Especially since she's got that weird,
lack of eyebrows.
Dreadlocky thing going on. Dreadlocky thing going now. No, she's never had eyebrows.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you any more or less invested after seeing this? I mean, again,
I'm invested anyway. What are you talking about?
I know that's the thing. Like they're putting out trailers. It's like if you were in, you were in. Are you supposed to be lured in? If you weren't in, I don't know. Understand really what
I don't get that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess they have to work at maybe trying to convince people to watch it. I don't understand that at all.
Yeah. Who was out? Who's out on this?
Yeah, I think it's meant, certainly to tease somewhat more casual fans and maybe even get folks who are, kind of new-ish to the franchise. Certainly the hardcore fans are going to watch, no matter what. I think it's not necessarily for that in terms of the way it's put together. Mm-hmm. Certainly they know that we're going to pick apart various things like the year that it takes place. 2024, we know from Deep Space Nine, that's when the Bell riots occurred, right? Which seems rather sort of timely for the era we happen to be in. It's sort of eerily prescient. And separately, although this does get into weird, slightly political territory, so I apologize to the United Kingdom and Ireland. But we also know that the Irish unification of 2024 was a critical event that was mentioned in TNG. So that being the entire geographical island of Ireland being a single nation. So don't know if they'll cover either one of those, but it is interesting that they chose 2024.
Yeah.
So it begs the question, though, like what you're just saying, like And we've asked this question of, you know, fans who may have young children watching Prodigy, and a similar kind of question, like, who is Picard for? I mean, like, do they actually think they're just going to go out and randomly get people who've never watched any Next Generation or any of the movies to sort of come and watch Picard and understand the whole connection? Like, oh, look, 7 of 9 doesn't have stuff on her face. She's no longer 7 of 9. So, you know what I mean? Like, for someone who's not a Star Trek fan, you know, or has invested in some, and like Guinan shows up. Okay, so why is she on the show? Is this like a crossover color purple kind of vibe going here? Like, if I didn't know enough about Picard, why would I watch it?
I think you're looking at it from a different perspective than what they might be intending. So certainly for us, part of what they show in here is for fans like us, or like, oh my gosh, you know, let's pick apart what were the exact starship types that they showed that were shooting, you know, in the chase. Obviously, we'll pick up on, you know, Guinan being there, on Q being there. We didn't talk about Brent Spiner, who is presumably playing a Sung ancestor of some sort when he gets the blue suppository, I suppose.
Yeah, didn't the Sung ancestor that was in the last season, didn't he come with them?
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, he was certainly there when they made the Picard golem. I don't know.
Yeah, because that was my impression.
Was he in the final shot on the crew? The deck?
I can't recall, but when I saw, because it wasn't like just one shot, they showed him in multiple shots in this trailer, and I thought, oh, I guess that character must be sort of along for the ride, and I guess Brent Spiner is a show regular now, as not Data, but as the you know, Noonien Sung's, what are we supposed to be, grandson?
I can't remember his first name. I want to call him like Auric or something, like as if he was Auric Goldfinger from the Bond series. But I guess you're right. I guess it would make sense that it would be him. But I don't recall seeing him in the final you know, family portrait on the
I was going to say, like, okay, there's this podcast that I follow called Spotcast, and on the season finale, they have a picture. Yeah, they have a picture of this scene that Jaime is talking about. In fact, so if you just go to Spotcast and look here, I'll just paste a link. You can look at yourself.
So is he there, or
there
was
is
it
no
like...
Brent? No, there's no Brent.
Okay, so what we can say is retroactively, he was on the ship. He just happened to be in the bathroom when this dramatic moment happened.
Maybe he's a hologram. We don't know. Right?
He was on the toilet, or he was in the as some other podcasts say, he was in the transporter room.
He's in a buffer.
Nobody uses the toilet anymore. They just beam their waste out of their bodies. Eat what you want, kids. Yeah. It will not hurt on the way out. So,
wow.
This episode is taking a left turn.
All right. Well, speaking of left turns, so today's clickbait was that Picard will end after season 3. And apparently there's a whole slew of, we just talked about this before we started recording, there's a whole slew of links here. And so I picked one from Gizmodo, which is one we trust. So they're not sure. We do know that they're filming season 3 and season 2 at the same time, right? I think Jaime mentioned that, right? So I don't know if there's anything definitive about this, but apparently Patrick Stewart was interviewed. I'd read earlier today that he and someone else, maybe the showrunner, had said there wasn't a plan to do anything after this. Anybody catch anything in this story?
It's so hard to say. We don't really have definitive, like, what will happen here, but it would make sense given what some of the article talks about, that you have an 81-year-old individual in a pandemic. You don't want to be ghoulish about it, but as producers of very expensive IP, you kind of need to plan out, like, how long could this possibly go? Now, granted, of course, naysayers will say that could absolutely happen even with somebody in perfect health at 25 years old. They could go splat in like a motorcycle accident or something, right? Just to be ghoulish about it.
Yeah.
But it's just from a numbers game of, they can't have necessarily 7 seasons here all planned out and committed to, because you don't know what's going to happen. People get old, stuff happens. And since Picard is, even certainly Star Trek Discovery is very much the different kind of show. It's specifically with Michael Burnham as the main character. That's even more true of of Picard, right? Like it's literally his name is in the title. So
Yeah.
if you don't have a Picard, you're definitely going to have a definitive end. And so I think what they'll do is I have season 2 and 3. It'll feel wrapped up, leave a tiny little edge open if they want to do another season, but they can't plan for like a 10 season sort of thing, like a Game of Thrones bit, right? Or 8 seasons.
Yeah. Well, and I think it also doesn't just come down to Patrick Stewart's health. It comes down to his, lifestyle. Does he want to be working, regularly? He may choose to, but I do think they need to have that flexibility in there to allow for the fact that, the man deserves to be, taking it easy if he chooses to. He doesn't have to do a show for us. It's very wonderful that he is, but he doesn't have to.
Yeah.
And he does have dogs to feed, but
But this isn't the real Picard anyway. This is a Golem now. Didn't he pass? So spoilers.
Yes, the Picard's original body is no longer available to him.
Right. So this is sort of a pseudo clone, if you.
Well, it sort of depends on what you think about with relation to consciousness, which various Star Trek series and shows and etc. have definitely canonically said you can move the consciousness around, and I think Spock is probably the most applicable one here, where he straight up died, body completely remade, and his Katra, what do they call his?
Yep.
His spirit was sort of drug muled around by bones, right?
Unwillingly drug muled.
Yeah. Just crammed up in there.
That's right.
So moving on, just a quick story here about Daredevil, which I've been watching to catch up on. I've taken a break from starting season 3 again, after having watched the Getting Chastised and then watching the Defender series. Defenders, sorry, the Defenders, yeah,
the Defenders.
Yeah, and then I got distracted by a few other TV shows that I need to catch up on. In movies. But so Daredevil viewership has spiked following the release of Hawkeye and Spider-Man and Spider-Man No Way Home. So in the Marvel on Netflix or Daredevil on Netflix is enjoying a sort of second life, I guess.
Nice.
Right? It's good for Mr. Cox and gang, right?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it leads to something more. I actually just finished watching the last 2 series in that run myself, so I'm all done now. I've watched all of them, but I just finished watching Punisher season 2 and Jessica Jones season 3, which are the last 2 that I hadn't watched. And it's funny because they have a varying degree. The shows have a varying degree of finality. I think when they first started canceling those shows, I think they were sort of not sure that they were going to be canceled. They were kind of leaving the doors open, whereas the last few seemed like they wrap up a little bit in more of a neater fashion. But I found myself, having now watched the entirety of the Marvel Netflix experience, there's certainly things that I think are incongruous with what they want to do with the MCU television shows, the MCU movies. Obviously, they can't. It's not a straight flip. I can't imagine them doing those style of shows that dark on Disney Plus, but I loved the portrayals of a lot of those characters and would love to see them brought over. You could always say that the Netflix series is a multiverse world, not 616, and then bring those same actors over and say, well, of course, they're the same people. They're just, slight variations, and do them over as not quite as dark. I really, some of them, obviously, I think we're all okay with leaving, some of the storylines from those Netflix series on the cutting room floor now. But I do think that there's a lot that could still be done with the Daredevil character. There's a lot that could still be done with the Punisher character. Jessica Jones, I mean, Kristen Ritter is so fantastic in that role. I think Mike Coulter as Luke Cage, I think you could do a lot with those characters, and even some of the sub characters beyond that. I thought there's a lot of strength there too. I think it could be really good to try and weave them in to some of these other series, but it's a question of whether they want to appropriate those into or they're committed to doing more new characters. Again, they're bringing us Moon Knight and She-Hulk and Ms. Marvel and all these other things this year. I don't know if they need to go back to that if they don't want to, but other than a cameo, why would they put Charlie Cox into, even the 4 seconds he's in Spider-Man. Sorry, spoilers, kids, but he's in Spider-Man for 5 seconds.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't understand what the long game is. I'll be really curious to see if they revive more of these characters and if they let these same actors play them.
I was going to say, wouldn't they do that? Like, wouldn't they sometime, or at some point in the future, maybe they have to have or an end game kind of deal where you roll everybody into it, right? At some point for some mega, and you bring, mind you, they have a different Flash too, don't they? But, you could bring Jessica Jones in. I mean, she's pretty much, Kristen Ritter's pretty much got that role, right?
It's so hard to imagine if they decided to go back to bringing those characters to life. It's, of course, nothing is permanent. You obviously, different people can play different roles. We've seen that across all of different, television over the years. But it's so hard to imagine how, like Charlie Cox is so good as Daredevil. Kristen Ritter is so good as Jessica Jones. John Bernthal is the Punisher. Like some of these, they're such perfect fits that it seems like it would be a shame to not give them another crack at it. But then, again, do they want to come back? Do they want to divorce people's memories from that previous thing? To me, I think the telling thing is that they did cast Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock for his very brief cameo in Spider-Man, just because that to me opens the door to all of this, right? They're saying, well, Charlie is Matt Murdock, so maybe everybody else is everybody else.
True. And the other thing, too, is that, like, from a production point of view, filming a TV show is quite different than making a movie, too, right? That's, from an actor's point of view, mm-hmm. It's quite a bit different. I mean, you spend, you listen to stories of actors in movies. They spend a lot of time in the trailers waiting for the shots to be set up, kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's a little bit more close to the ground when you're doing a TV show. So that might be a different kind of experience. And when you think about it, like the time on screen, there's way more time in a TV show than there is in a movie, right? Because you can run a TV show for a long, long time, right?
Yeah, almost to a fault, though. Like, I honestly feel like what Marvel/Disney is doing with the MCU television programs on Disney Plus works so much better because they're giving you a nice tight 6 hours total, whether that's divided up into 5 episodes, 6 episodes, 8 episodes, whatever it is. They're giving you a pretty nice tight story, although we talked about how they've kind of been overloading them and then being hard to deliver on the ending of them. But I felt like watching even the stuff that I was truly enjoying, like Daredevil season 3 is great, Punisher season 2 is great, Jessica Jones season 3 is great, but all of them I think come in at 13 episodes, and I found myself thinking this could have easily been like 8 really tight episodes. There's a lot of digression, secondary characters, just stuff that they didn't need to do. So
true, but even 6 or 8 episodes is still longer than any movie, right?
No, it's definitely true, and I think that's why people have grown so attached to these characters, is because you do get that amount of time with them. I feel like all the stuff they've done on whether it's the Netflix stuff or the Disney Plus stuff, I feel like it's honestly it's kind of almost a better deal unless you are doing Thor, Captain America, Iron Man, or a self-titled individualized movie focusing on you, where especially if they're doing like a trilogy or a quadrilogy, you really are almost better to get the TV show, because the TV show is going to really connect you to people and you're in their house and you're right there, and it's just such a different experience, right?
I also wonder if the whole detail of when you've got 70 millimeter space to work with, like in terms of the size of the screen, you can put more on the screen, and entertain people more that way, whereas on TV you're kind of like constrained to admittedly, it's the same resolution and things like that, right? So, but you've got sort of a smaller canvas to work on. There's less detail, It's true, but then you also have the luxury of time where you don't have to go from like quick exposition set piece. You can get into character. Yeah, sometimes movies bounce around so much I get lost in terms of like, the quick changes, whereas here they have time to breathe, they have time to sort of expound on things, right? You can stand there and wait for the subway to come as opposed to, flipping from one scene to another, right?
Yeah, no, and I think that's where the real strength is. I think that's the part that I enjoy about the Disney Plus series, and I enjoy about the Netflix series is you do have the time, although I do feel like the Netflix series almost an unnecessary amount of time. Like season 3 of Daredevil, there's a character in there who's like a secondary or tertiary character who they sort of keep going back to. And he's supposed to be the sort of everyman caught up in this crazy world and everything else. And, the actor did a fine job, and it's fine. It just feels like every minute he was on screen, I'm like, but I want to see Daredevil. I appreciate what they were doing, and I thought he was quite good, but I still found myself thinking, I came for a Daredevil show. Why are you doing this?
Right. Yeah. Well, it's like we could say the same thing about Boba Fett today, right?
Well, and I think we might just have that opinion. We'll talk about Book of Boba Fett in a little bit.
Yeah. All right. The other story this week that's sort of been making rounds, and you guys may have seen it. I think this came out yesterday or the day before. Yeah, yesterday, 25th. No, 2 days ago.
Yep.
That apparently China has rewritten the ending. They do this quite often. They've rewritten the ending of Fight Club. Mm-hmm. Yeah, all of a sudden, as in the scene where the Pixies are singing and Tyler the main character has gotten killed, basically Tyler Durden, the second personality. Spoilers for you if you haven't seen the film. Kills him off, and then anarchy wins, and they take out the big financial institutions and blow up all the buildings in the downtown core, which to me is kind of ridiculous because that's not where the money is. But the Chinese government has decided that no, they've rewritten the ending. It just ends with the screen saying something to the effect of, the authorities figured out, found him, captured all the, these insurgents who were doing this stuff, and he was sent away to prison for the rest of his life. And that's how they claim the story ends. And they've done this a few times with other stories, but of course, there's lots of memes and stuff going around about this, right? So yeah, it says they figured out who he was, and they put him in jail, and he'll be discharged from a hospital in 2012 or something like that. No, what's it say? Or is this a joke? I think it's a joke. Yeah.
Yeah,
anyway,
honestly, I've been waiting for someone within the. I didn't see any comment from David Fincher or any of the people that worked on it. I think it's also very kind of interesting that it happened on the same week that Meatloaf died, which of course he's a character in the film. But
right, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can't say I'm surprised by this. Like, are you at all surprised that the authoritarian regime, basically rewrote the ending of a movie to say that the authoritarians always win in the end? Like, I don't know.
Well, to be honest with you, I'm surprised that you can even watch this film in China, Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty subversive for the way that they approach things.
Yeah. And they're also they talk here, another example is apparently the Bohemian Rhapsody film. They took a lot of Freddie Mercury's exploits out of it.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, that just makes sense, right? They don't want to promote that kind of thing. I'm surprised. Again, I don't even know why they show that movie there,
Yeah.
Anyway, just interesting. I mean, the country that has no internet, are we surprised by this, really?
No.
Alrighty. Well, speaking of craziness, let's move on to Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, so the Mortal Kombat movie that came out on HBO Max apparently is going to get a sequel. Apparently it did well enough to do that. It did have some box office, but it came out, during that pandemic-y time frame. And so guessing most of the reason this is getting made is because of the streaming numbers, as Max continues to be a big part of HBO's, current and future value streams. So I guess spoilers for the first movie, for a franchise, and we talked about this in the review many moons ago, for a franchise that's all about a fighting tournament, there literally is no tournament in the first movie. So presumably this one will go into the actual tournament.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's not that big of a spoiler, but if you win and
I got to ask, how does it end?
Hey, wouldn't it be great if we had a tournament?
Yeah, it essentially is like, okay, the whole premise is Shang Tsung wants to avoid the tournament and cheat on the rules, right? And so he does not win in that respect, as vague spoilers from the movie. So it's like, okay, I guess the tournament is actually going to happen. The good guys are going to have to get themselves together for that next challenge.
So it's a cliffhanger.
In a very strange way. It's almost like a prequel to what this will be.
But this was Dune? This was the unsatisfying ending of Dune?
Yeah.
Isn't that movie about being lost in a desert, though? Isn't that the whole point of Dune?
I suppose, although, after all that build up to be like, hey, we're all going to go for a walk into the desert. Cool. I don't know.
Yeah.
That one, the more that I haven't not watched it since the first watching, I've been hoping that I'll watch it again the second time soon. But I've after we did the Spockies, where it won movie of the year, I found myself ruminating more and more. And obviously it's unfortunate timing because so many people didn't get a chance to see Spider-Man, but I still feel like as much as I enjoyed Dune and it was a beautiful movie, it was ultimately mildly unsatisfying.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed the Ghostbusters movie too.
Agreed.
Same
Absolutely.
token.
And that was a very satisfying, probably one of the most satisfying, like long range sequels that I've seen in a long time. Sometimes those really fail to land let's do a sequel 25 years or 30 years later.
I was going to say, but did it even have any kind of like major buzz? Like, it didn't have the same kind of buzz that Dune had. I mean,
No.
Everybody kind of was issued a ticket to Dune almost, it seemed like, right?
Well, it was the thing because it was such a big build up about it. And again, I think, Denis Villeneuve has enough of a reputation now that people just want to see it. Plus, there is the hives for those, what's his name? The young man who's the star, the French, Timothée Chalamet.
Timothée Chalamet.
Yeah, he... he has a bit of an audience following already on his own. So, yeah, there was just a lot of hype around. And again, to be fair, that first movie cast is stacked. But, again, I get it. I absolutely get why people enjoyed it. I enjoyed it, too. I just think as I reflected on it, that was the part that kind of let me down was you didn't really tell me a whole story. You told me half a story.
Yeah. Well, having read the book, I can tell you it's just very unsatisfactory.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so let's move on to the main part of our show, which is to talk about Star Trek. And this time we're talking about Star Trek Prodigy, Season 1, Episode 9. The two-parter. This is Part 1, A Moral Star.
Yeah, so this one begins seemingly right after the ending of the previous episode where Rock Talk had explained how she had brought the crew back after her Groundhog Day-esque sort of extended time to learn all the things she needed to learn. I started out this episode really weirded out that the entire crew was there with the sort of dreadnought husk body that was there. I was like, how did they not throw that out an airlock?
Yeah.
and torpedo it as soon as they could? I thought for sure that was going to end up with bad things, but in this case it was very fortunate because they sort of accidentally knock it over, and the R2D2-esque video of the Diviner's demands come to play.
Yeah, he comes out and says, years ago you served my father in the Clone Wars, and now he begs you to help him with the struggle against the Empire.
Yeah, more or less, except with more, villain-esque things of like, by the way,
come back
we're going to make a trade. You give me the Protostar, and in return, I will not kill all these miners that are essentially hostages on my...
That's minors in all sense of the word, right? They are minors who are minors.
That's true. They're children, child labor workforce that he's got there, right?
Dark.
His slave
very Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
and so that sort of brings us to the what we're calling the Starfleet decision, which is, in some respects, are they literally going to be able to use their last proto warp jump using the proto drive to get over to Starfleet's space and say, hey, Starfleet, this bad thing is happening. Can you go save these miners? The pro of that choice is you're going to be able to get people who are actually trained to do this thing and, more than one ship, right? They're going to bring a fleet to bear here. The downside being, if you make that route, you don't know if there's going to be enough time before the Diviner kills the children. The other decision is to just, go back and try to take on the Diviner himself. The pro is you have at least a time-based better chance of being able to do something to help those miners. The downside is you're literally outnumbered 100-1 is what they say. And they do come to make the sort of metaphorical Starfleet decision, which Hollow Janeway keys in on, of like, well, going into this hopeless situation to try to help others is a very Starfleet thing to do. So I think that's a nice one to sort of explain to the kiddos, this is what being in Starfleet is about.
It's funny. They say they're outnumbered 100-1. I guess that includes like the little robot cat things that they're talking about, because when you see them out there, there's 6 of them and the Diviner and Dreadnought, and really is just Diviner and Dreadnought. They kind of leave everything else behind. So really, they outnumber them 3-1.
Yeah, from a talking people standpoint, that's probably true. I think it was more from a how many pew pew pews can we put out at the same time that they pew pew pew.
I guess, yeah.
But it's also from a kid's perspective. It's the dad versus the daughter, right? So the dad is the menacing guy, right? So he's going to have more power than the child, right?
Yeah, they definitely have those themes going throughout this season, and it's coming to sort of a crest here in the 2-part finale, is what it seems, for sure. Yeah. We've got a nice scene of them doing the prep work before they go into this negotiation. So this is showing some growth throughout the season, right? That they're not just going to wing it as they normally do, and they're not going to just do it as individuals. They're putting in all of their skills, including Murph, which we'll come up to what ends up happening in the episode there. But spoilers, the exact technique that I thought was going to happen in the previous episode ended up happening in this one.
Yep. Good call, buddy. Good call. You nailed it.
Yeah.
We're going to have Murph do something that we've telegraphed deeply. Okay.
Yeah, because otherwise it was like he was only there for moral support, like a pet or a mascot, right? He was not bringing anything to the literal and metaphorical table that they had there as they were planning. So they proto-warp into the meeting. It's kind of a cool effect. I don't know how it showed up for you all coming out of the TV break, but it just like has like an oomph to it as it comes in right after the annoying commercials that I see on the low tier plan of Paramount Plus. And they meet with the Diviner, right? They get tractor beamed in by the Rev 12, just as they had planned, and very Darth Vader-esque. The Diviner has altered the deal, right? He's like, oh, by the way, so I'm gonna have to keep my daughter, and they're like, okay. Also, we don't have a ship, so if you take the ship, how the heck are we gonna get away? Right? So they do a little trade. It's like, all right. And Gwyn steps in. Like, all right. Well, she'll sacrifice herself, and the rest of the crew will get to keep the Rev 12 ship, right? As you might expect, the Diviner's like, ha ha, I lawyered you. So, as he's flying away in the Protostar, what do? They phaser the power generators, and like, well, they're not going to have gravity. Yeah. They're not going to have their atmospheric shields. They're all going to die. I promised them a ship. I did not promise them their lives. Right? Very, very villanesque. And we get a Goth Hollow Janeway that
was awesome.
People have been calling in the internet the
dark side. Yeah,
I'm your master now kind of thing for real hologram.
I love that, like her makeup changes. Like, come on,
whole color scheme and everything changes. But it turns out that Gwyn was really just stalling the Diviner. She and her father have some sort of telepathic connection between each other. He's like, you're stalling me, what's going on? And it turns out that the proto drive, or at least the star itself, is not on the ship. One of the things they had planned to do, and where they talked about using the cargo transporters before, is they had actually faked out I don't remember the Medusan's character's name. It's the name of the
Zero?
Zero, thank you.
Zero, yeah.
They had faked out as if they had
they 3D printed a Zero, yeah.
Yeah, they 3D printed another body there and had Murph swallow and contain the Protostar piece. So he's shoved in there, pretending to be Zero. And so they don't have a proto drive that's functional on the Protostar. And
so I got to go back and watch for continuity. Was Rock Talk carrying Zero the whole time?
I think so.
Yeah, because like it was a duplicate. It wasn't actually a functional Zero. It was just a replica, right?
Yeah, it was just like a housing that would look the same. And so you've got the part that goes into the to be continued sort of very quick cut is that the remaining crew on the Rev 12 needs to put things back together, get power going, get gravity going back together before the Diviner is going to return in the Protostar, which he's not that far away because they hit maximum warp earlier in this thing, and without the proto drive they can hit 9.7, so he's definitely going to come zooming in here real fast.
Yeah, so it ended really abruptly for me. Did it? I guess it just like they were just heading off to do their thing, and then titles came up. And is that like that for you on the low tier of Paramount Plus?
Yeah, it was even more confusing because when it comes back from the pre-programmed commercial break stuff, it just goes into the theme song for the credits, and I was like, wait, did it go too far? And I went back, I was like, oh no, it literally just cuts right there. There's no to be continued or anything.
Yeah, no, it did the same thing for us because so when you rewind, you don't have to sit through the commercial again, do you?
Thankfully, no. The one thing that they do right is they don't make you rewatch that stuff. Unlike Crunchyroll has historically been like, oh, did you go back in time to this one spot? I guess you get to watch the commercial again, which is annoying.
Yeah, some of the TV apps do that. Some of the Rogers built apps do that. If you're watching like a TV station sort of app, you have to sit through the commercials.
Yeah, so it sets us up pretty nicely for, if not smoothly from a transition standpoint. It does feel like this was meant to be one big episode that they chopped up into two.
Which is surprising because when they showed the first one, which was a two-parter, they did it as one long episode for us here, right?
I think there might be some tensions here between, like, what are they going to do for Nickelodeon? Would they put this on the cable networks at some point? When it comes to premieres, it's not atypical for premieres to be longer than the normal show time slot would be. So I think the premiere being one 2-part long episode is normal. I think if I were to guess here, given that Discovery is going to begin on February 10th again, and this show is slated to end on, at least for the break, on February 3rd, I'm guessing it was we cannot have a 1-week gap in Star Trek because people will cancel. We cannot have people canceling. Find a way to make
that
this
Lopez
stretch
guy's
out.
going to drop us again. We better get on this.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we talk about the uniforms now.
Yeah, let's.
I like these uniforms. I gotta say.
Yeah.
The cadet uniforms. I think they're cadet uniforms.
Yeah,
right?
maybe it's the black or something. I don't know.
They must have been, because I
even
was thinking like, oh, it's funny they're not divided by like rank. They're not divided by subject area. They were just uniform, as in uniformity, true uniformity. I guess the idea is that they're supposed to be they are cadets now, because a couple episodes back they were like, well, we're not cadets. Now they clearly are more like cadets.
Even Janeway changes her colors
to match them. Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, the sort of gray. Yeah.
The other scene that killed me was the coffee. Because there was the whole running joke throughout Voyager of how much Janeway enjoyed her coffee. And then they're all like doing the montage where they're like trying to come up with a plan and they're going to make it work. And she's like, anybody feel like a cup of coffee? And they, of course, now she's feeding coffee to children, which is hilarious.
True.
I did think it was interesting. We talked about the way this sort of ended abruptly. I felt like it didn't end as abruptly as some, like it didn't end on a cliffhanger, really, in the same way that maybe Trek has in the past or other shows have in the past. If this was meant to be sort of more enticing, you'd have ended with, the shields going down, them hanging onto the rope, trying not to get sucked out into space. Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And then like the diviner being like, "Mo ha 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 ha." And that would have been a more, we have to, tune in next week to see if everybody survives. They went like 2 minutes further than that, to the point of they all acknowledged that this was a ruse. They were like off to do their thing. And they're like, we're going to pull together. We're going to do this together. And that's where they ended. And I thought, well, that's a very interesting, like, is this for, is the current generation of kids not able to handle like, oh my God, it's going to be a week and they might be dead? Like, it really felt like they went 2 minutes into the next episode to sort of give you that more sort of stable plateau to leave upon than, oh, our heroes are in peril, which is a very sort of traditional way to sort of end that story of, you want to tune in next time to find out what happens to them. Now you're like, well, we know what they're going to do. They just told us. To me, it was an interesting way to do that. Maybe, again, for that younger audience, they didn't want to have them be like, oh no, Rock Talk's going to die.
Yeah, I like that. Totally could be it. Like it's a more pleasing happy ending, right? So
yeah, but for a two-parter, like again, when it's a strict two-parter, not even like a pseudo two-parter, which all of these episodes have had some sort of continuity. But yeah, I just thought it was really interesting to sort of not leave them in that jeopardy that you sort of have gotten used to with those old 1930s 40s movie serials. Till now, that's been a very traditional storytelling method of you better turn the page. It's like ending a chapter on a moment like that, right, in a book, right? Like something's gonna happen. Oh, I better turn the page and find out what happens next. In this case, they were like, oh no, everybody's fine now. They're just gonna figure out how to solve this problem. Like, all right.
True, but even when you read a kid's book, like there's always the point where the kid says, just one more chapter, which they can't do here because of constraints and time and whatever. But
yeah,
you know what I mean. Like even in kid books, they end on a sort of bit of a cliffhanger. They don't really resolve things from one chapter to the next, right?
Yeah. I don't know. Today's generation would have all thought Flash Gordon was going to die, like every single week. I don't know, they just couldn't handle it.
True. Yeah.
You guys didn't think about it as parents as being leaning on the forgiving side of saving the sanity of the parents who are watching this with their kids? Imagine if it had ended with the equivalent of like, Mr. Worf, fire. And then the kid's like, Dad, Mom, did he fire? Did he fire? Oh, I don't know. We'll have to wait. I didn't make the show. How would I know if they fired or not?
for a week. Yeah, it's fair. I guess it depends on the age, like I just think about where I was as a, I'm thinking this is sort of teeny, like, probably tween age is probably about where you want to start with this. Maybe, 9, 10 would probably be about as young as you want to go. But maybe there are younger kids who are watching this who are like, oh my God, it's all horrible. But, if your kid is that sensitive, don't watch Star Trek with them. Put the Teletubbies back on. They're fine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It did seem odd while I was watching the show to sort of like it did have sort of a funny feel to it. Like I kept wondering, why is Gwen giving up so easily? Why did she just I mean, that was that part of the plan they talked about beforehand, or because once she gets down in front of the diviner, I kind of wondered, like, when a kid is away from the parent, they can talk about how they're going to put on a brave face and all that kind of stuff, but then when they get in front of the actual parent, they crumble, right? She didn't quite do that, but I kind of wondered why. And clearly it did telegraph that there was something they knew there was, because they did talk about, hey, we've got this trick we can pull, but so we didn't really know what the trick was going to be, right? But the whole time that they're bending over and letting him have their way and take the ship, and it's almost like they gave up too easily, sort of thing.
Yeah, and again, it's funny because he's been fairly shrewd throughout this whole thing, but then he's just like, oh, of course you've done what I've told you to. I've got you, where I want you. He kind of bought into that pretty willingly too.
True, yeah. It did sort of feel very, very like simplistic in that sense, right? So, yeah, I'm surprised they didn't do the typical Star Trek trope and computer start self-destruct sequence 27.
Well, it's funny because Dal says that at one point, oh, we've told Janeway to start the self-destruct if things go wrong. I'm like, do they let the holograms set off the self-destructs? Because I'd like to talk to the engineers behind that, please. That sounds like a terrible
trolley
plan.
Simulation.
Yeah, like bad plan, red alert.
Well, also, it seemed very, very un-Star Trek-y, like for me, like when they're coming and the ship's flying in towards the other station there, and he says, lower the shields. Like, whenever has a Star Trek episode gone and lowered the shields as soon as they come within, phaser distance of any other, opponent, right?
Yeah.
It just seemed odd.
Yeah.
Anyway. But then, now that they've showed us what the trick was, it's okay.
It's all set up for a happy ending. Here we go.
Yep. All right. Cool. Tune in next week for the happy ending, and then our review of the happy ending. All right. Are you doing a recap of the Mandalorian too, Jaime? I see you put some notes here.
Yeah, I can.
Notes. Sure. Okay.
I can't do the recap. This is ostensibly season 1, episode 5, entitled "The Return of the Mandalorian" of Book of Boba Fett, but it's really kind of like another episode for the previous season of Mandalorian, it feels.
Yeah, this is the coda. This is the coda episode to season 2 or the first episode of season 3.
Yeah. I couldn't decide if it was a 2.5 or like a pre, episode 0 of season 3. because it's except for the recap of previous episodes and the very end of this episode, it really doesn't star Book of Boba Fett character, which is interesting. I guess these Disney Plus shows definitely get to play a lot with crossing over quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that we were excited about, right? Now we've got Boba Fett, The Mandalorian, Ahsoka, and theoretically sort of the Rangers of the New Republic, although that series is dead, all sort of concurrently happening in the same time and space, so they could build towards this sort of massive crossover-y kind of event piece and build all of them towards, the larger storyline, which is, I don't know what, Grand Admiral Thrawn. I don't know where they're going with all this stuff, but I think that's going to be a lot of fun to have these shows happening in the same world.
Yeah. Indeed. I thought it would be a bit more of like, oh, here's where they're going to introduce characters and have a little bit of arcs, kind of the way that the Ahsoka stuff worked. Of like, oh, it's setting up another series, but like stuff is happening in a few episodes here. Here, this was like, oh no, there is no Boba Fett in this episode other than the recap of the prior episode where Boba and Fennec are talking about like, we need muscle if we're going to take on the syndicate, right? So we'll come back to that at the tail end, but we start off the regular part of the episode with Mando going in to butcher the butchers, or at least one butcher, right? He's collecting a bounty on a guy, and you've got a pretty cool, interesting sequence of him using the Darksaber, which in my mind kind of really points to this is why normal people don't use lightsabers. And it's really easier if you're a Jedi and trained, because he like straight up accidentally ends up getting self-cut by his own blade, right? Yeah. But cool sequence. Kind of interesting that he's like, look, man, like I'm to the workers who are remaining after he takes out their boss. He's like, look, I have no quarrel with you, and your now dead boss has a lot of money in there. Like, I'm not here for that. That's up to you all to take that if you want. And they do. Right? He gets his way out, and sort of ends up finding his way through means of turning in that bounty and avoiding people cajoling him around like, hey, why don't you eat with us and take off your mask and so we can see who you are, kind of thing. He does get the info from them at the little like restaurant party of like, this is the way to get to the covert, right? The Mandalorians, the is it the Armorer? What's the
the Armorer is what they've been calling the leader of the group.
Yeah, and the big tank guy is the other one who's remaining. He reconvenes with them and finds them, and it sort of catches him up to what happened, right, with Moff Gideon and what they ended up having with the other Mandalorians. Was it Bo-Katan? Is that the name?
Yeah, Bo-Katan Kreese, yeah.
Bo-Katan's folks, and well as the what ended up happening with the Darksaber. And oh, by the way, he owns the Darksaber because he legitimately took it through combat, which leads us into eventually that sort of like rumble in the space jungle when the other tank guy, Mandalorian guy, is like, yo, so my ancestors made that. I think that belongs to me as inheritance, so I'm gonna fight you for it. And they do fight. And Mando ends up winning, even though he's like kind of not very good with the saber, which he had done a little bit of training session, and he's kind of fighting against what it's naturally trying to do. And they go through their little sort of I vow that I have not shown my face sort of thing. And he sort of struggles a little bit to answer. They're like, you have to say whether you have or not, like truthfully. And he's like, yeah, I've shown my face. And like, oh, because we're weirdos. We're the weird cult Mandalorians, as we learned from Bo-Katan. You can't be a Mandalorian anymore. And so he can't show his face again, sort of metaphorically, except unless he bathes in the underground lakes on Mandalore, which apparently no longer exist after they got bombarded by just sort of blown up by the Empire. So that presumably will be sort of the main thrust for Mando, along with the thing I sort of skipped was that his Beskar spike, he gets it reforged into, I think, chainmail, maybe?
That was my guess. Yeah, I saw. I was trying to figure out what they were making there. The only thing that made sense was chainmail for Grogu.
Well, and I was going to say, like, that big long spear ended up making that little tiny pile of, like, what did they do with the extra leftover Beskar, right? They must have had more. By the way, that just to follow up, her name is Ishi Tib, and she's the guild master. voiced by Helen Sadler.
Yeah,
She's also been in a lot of Rebel stuff and whatever. Yeah.
So I don't know if Grogu is going to eventually end up with a Frodo-style mithril vest that he'll just sort of secretly have on, hidden, or if he's going to go full-on like King Arthur Excalibur, like have the helmet or the cowl part of the thing too, which would be sweet.
Well, I'm wondering if this all pays forward. I wonder if this is building towards the fall of the Jedi Temple story that we've seen played out in the most recent trilogy, where Kylo Ren, in response to Luke seeing the dark side in him, basically blows up and they kill all the Jedi trainees. I wonder if this armor might be the thing that saves Grogu.
Oh, maybe. Mm-hmm. Well, what's interesting too is that the point about the spear is that she says that you can't have a weapon made out of Beskar because it's the only thing that'll go through Beskar armor. And interesting, even the dark saber won't cut through the Beskar, which is kind of cool.
Yeah,
it's like the ultimate rock paper scissors Beskar.
Yep.
Yeah. So from a sort of philosophy and metaphor thing, it sort of makes sense that he would sort of go with that. Like, oh yeah, it's sort of against our philosophy that I don't know if it's Mandalorian philosophy or if it's more like their weird sort of cult part of Mandalorian religion where it should be armor, right? And there's also kind of that practical aspect of like he is actually giving up the sort of tactical advantage he has, as he stated, like it will block a lightsaber. This is useful to have in case I run into things that have lightsabers or dark saber like things, and it does turn it sort of nicely into armor for a foundling, and not just any foundling, a very specific one, because he wanted it for Grogu. So I do think you guys are right that because fans had sort of wondered since the end of season 2 of The Mandalorian of like, oh no, does Grogu get murdered when the Jedi Temple falls? Right? And I think they're saying here, well, no, because Mando is going to go back and reunite, right? He clearly has a very close relationship with Grogu.
Yeah, and he's clearly having an issue detaching, right? Like he gave him to Luke. Luke took him back to be with the Jedi, but clearly we're not done with the relationship between Din Djarin and Grogu.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In this point of the story is where Mando, again, not having a replacement for the Razor Crest, is taking what I call Spirit Airlines here, the commercial travel to Mos Eisley on Tatooine, because I forget the mechanic lady's name, but she's apparently said that she had a replacement.
Amy Sedaris?
Yeah.
You had the name? Oh, good. Thank you.
Oh, Amy Sedaris was the actress, yeah.
Yeah, Peli Motto is the name of the character.
This one was a little bit fun of a scene for a few things. One, when it begins, you have the sort of TSA sort of moment where he's got to take off all the weapons that he has and pack them up into his checked baggage. And did you guys notice the style of droid that was? I know we've seen them before in Book of Boba Fett, and I didn't call it out or anything. But did you see the style of droid that is the one who's telling him that he can't have the weapons? If you've ever been to the Star Tours ride, that's the one who is piloting the sort of commercial shuttle that you're on that takes you into the Death Star and stuff.
Nice.
Yeah, good to know.
So that was pretty neat.
Did you ever get to Florida? Yeah.
I would like to say for the record, Jaime, that ride that he was on, commercial as it was, looked way better than a Spirit Airlines flight.
Indeed.
It looked a little nicer than the average Spirit Airlines flight. Just saying.
Yeah. And you had a cute little moment where the little alien kid.
Oh yeah, the Rhodian kid. Yeah,
sort of looking at him and sort of like little kids do, just turning around in the seats and kind of annoying their neighbors, sort of thing, with goodness in their hearts.
Yep.
So he does end up in Mos Eisley. We do have the sort of what I call the American graffiti moment with the Naboo N1. Very appropriate because this is a Lucas property, at least in origin, etc. Which as soon as I saw the thing with the cover, I was like, oh my God, it's a Naboo N1 from The Phantom Menace, isn't it? And it sure was. Yeah. It's, mostly parts, I suppose, but they do end up putting it back together and sort of customizing it out there, and he takes the N1 out for a spin, as I like to say. That's a good trick. And he gets
pulled over. Yeah,
he gets pulled over. He gets pulled over because they're like, "Yo, you don't have like the right transponder or something," which she had said like, "Oh, this is pre-Empire, so it's not going to have any tracking stuff. So it's going to be nicer for what you do, even though it's obviously a much smaller kind of thing than the big gunship of a Razor Crest." He tries talking it out, and then eventually says, "Forget it. I'm just going to zoom out of here," and he does. And the two X-wing cops, especially Appa, is like, "Bro, I don't want to be filling out paperwork on this one. Let's just not tell anybody that this happened." Which is great. Great to see that character return from the previous season of Mandalorian.
Yep.
And we got to see that thing really zoom too, right? Because I guess the rookie companion in the X-wing is like, "What? How did he do a jump? His hyperdrive didn't turn on." And like, no. That's just its sublight drive. That's just how fast it is. Pretty neat to see that.
Yep.
And after Mando comes back, he gets a little bit of an reintroduction to Fennec, who offers him money to be the muscle. And he says, "No, this is going to be on the house. I'm going to go do this for free for my friend Boba." And there we go.
Cool.
Yeah, it was a really interesting episode as a fan of The Mandalorian, but for a 7-episode season of the Book of Boba Fett, I found it incredibly disappointing. It's
really weird.
Weird. Absolutely weird to have this. I mean, you're right. Like, it wasn't even, obviously it was still set in the same timeline, set in the same, it goes to Tatooine and everything. But it was so Mandalorian focused. It just felt really incongruous to the Book of Boba Fett. And maybe that's the whole point, is that it's supposed to show that they're part of the same interconnected world and everything else. But it was just so strange. Like, you're right, Jaime, like, not a glimpse of Tamora Morrison or Boba Fett in this episode, other than the preview. To me, it was a really strange digression in a 7-episode series to do an entire episode focused on not your protagonist. Really, really odd. Good. Again, like, I enjoyed this episode immensely. I enjoyed spending time with that character again. I enjoyed more of the Mandalorian lore. I enjoyed the duel that he has with Paz Vizsla. I just think it's so strange that they spent this much time. I thought it was going to be like, oh, they'll show him what he's up to, then he'll get hit up by Fennec, he'll join the cause, and then we'll sort of get into that. But to spend an entire full episode essentially being the coda to season 2 or the beginning of season 3 of The Mandalorian was a very unusual choice.
It is. It makes me wonder. It makes me wonder if they're going to leave some plot line for this season of Book of Boba Fett slightly open and not resolved. I'm not saying the main plot. I truly believe the main plot with the Syndicate is probably going to be resolved in this season. But I wonder if there's some other plot line that will remain unresolved, maybe with the Hutts or something, that will then be a weird episode in the middle of Mandalorian or Ahsoka or something, where it's like, oh, okay, here you go. Here's the other part of that, just so they can keep things interconnected.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe that's the greater purpose of this, is just they're going to start to see more crossing over of these characters between the series they have going, just so that you feel that interconnectivity, so that you, A, have to watch them all, and B, so that you feel like there's a greater storyline happening here. I wanted to circle back to the whole battle that he has with the heavy gunner Mandalorian, who they do mention by name as Paz Vizsla. So I just wanted to remind myself. So did both you guys finish Clone Wars and Rebels? I can't remember where you guys left off.
No,
I have not, but I'm okay with.
I'm almost done, but no.
So the thing to know about the Boba Fett series and the Mandalorian on Disney Plus is that they are sort of spun out of the world of Clone Wars and of Rebels, and to an extent Bad Batch, because Dave Filoni, who was the sort of showrunner for those series and is the showrunner for this, is huge on The Mandalorian, always has been. And The Mandalorian play a pretty prominent role in all 3 of those series to an extent. There's this sort of thread that weaves through. And sometimes it's a major part. There's probably 20 or so episodes of those 3 series that are not necessarily essential for watching The Mandalorian or watching Boba Fett, but they certainly help a lot. You know, there's Boba Fett origin stuff in Clone Wars. There's Fennec stories in Bad Batch, and then there's greater Mandalorian overarching, like who leads, what happened, how did they run afoul of the Empire, all these different things. This was the first anywhere where we actually saw the Great Purge. We actually saw a glimpse of the bombing of Mandalore, where we saw Mandalore basically turned into nothingness, where they just seemed to drop nuke after nuke on Mandalore. And so, you know, we never saw that in the cartoons. We never really saw that conclusion, but it's really interesting. But they do reference, even in this episode, they reference the fact that Bo-Katan had the Darksaber at one point, and that she was trying to unite the Mandalorians. That took place in Rebels. And she was actually given the Darksaber as opposed to taking it in battle. And that was one of the things that they sort of said was, you know, you can't just take it.
It wasn't really hers.
It wasn't really hers, and therefore it didn't work. So they've done 2 things there. 1, they've told you that there's a backstory, so you can go back and watch how that happened. 2, it telegraphs the fact that eventually Bo-Katan is probably going to gun for Mandalorian, the Mandalorian or Din Djarin, just as we saw Paz Vizsla do here. The name Paz Vizsla is really important in this too, because for a couple of different reasons. 1, his ancient ancestor is Tari Vizsla, and Tari Vizsla was a Jedi Mandalorian, which is an oxymoron.
Right, they mentioned that in the story, yeah.
And they mentioned that very briefly here, but also Clan Vizsla is a major arc of the Clone Wars, the plotting of Clan Vizsla to take control of Mandalore, and just sort of who this clan is and their relative importance to the Mandalorian cause is.
Like the House of Dukas, right? You know, the guys who are always trying to kick work.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
How's it, Duras?
Duras. Yeah. No, it's absolutely that. It's basically this ill-intentioned clan that plays a major role in the Clone Wars, and then actually some of that stuff spills right over into Rebels. So all of this to say that it was interesting that they named that big bulking character who had a sort of somewhat friendly relationship with Din Djarin in The Mandalorian and helped support his escape with Grogu, and then to have them have this sort of showdown where now he's carrying this incredibly valuable, not just weapon, but symbol. Yeah, it's a symbol of leadership. And so now he's just gotten kicked out of the Mandalorian clan for taking off his helmet. But he's also theoretically got a claim to the leadership of the overarching Mandalorian people. But then we also found out that the covert that he was sort of supporting is down to two people.
Two people, yeah.
So, but then we also know that, Bo-Katan and her people are out there too. So anyway, all this to say, there is a wealth of Mandalorian lore to be discovered, and that is on the same service that you're paying for already if you're watching a Disney Plus. You could probably just find, I'm sure must be resources online, I haven't looked myself, but that explain, like, if you're into the Mandalorian stuff and you don't want to watch every single episode of those series, here are the 10, 20 episodes that you should watch that sort of give you the backstory. But there's a lot there, and it really will help you contextualize exactly what's sort of going on and give you a lot more nuance and a lot more layers to this stuff. And it will also telegraph where I think they're going on a few of these things too. Like, I think we're going to see some of those characters from Rebels, because Rebels is set right before A New Hope, which is about 10 years before the events of what we're seeing right now. So you could see those characters show up easily. Ahsoka being one of them, of course, we've already seen. But I think between the Ahsoka series, the Boba Fett series, the Mandalorian series, I'd be shocked if we didn't see more characters from Rebels, including other Mandalorian characters, pop up. So it's going to be really good. But there's a lot of really good in-canon, in continuity stuff that's out there in the cartoon series. And I know the cartoons aren't for everybody, but there's a lot of stuff there that you can really dip your feet into and really get a lot more background and understanding of what's going on here.
Cool. Yeah. But there's some really cool Easter eggs in this show. I don't know if you the part that they find that they fixed the ship with, the big long tube looking thing.
Oh, from the trash
Did you recognize
compactor.
that from the trash compactor thing that Han Solo tries to stop the trash compactor with? And the guy, the co-pilot, the second Lieutenant Reed that was flying along with Appa is his name is Max Lloyd Jones, and he was the body double who played Luke Skywalker in The Rescue.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So maybe they've kept him around to be Luke again.
Well,
Was that
give
maybe
him some talky talk parts, right? So he gets more money.
yeah.
Stick around. We might need you for something else.
Yeah, stick around, kid. He looked a lot like Mark Hamill back in the day too. If you look, go back and look again, right?
Yeah.
He had that sort of young, Wedge Antilles, Luke Skywalker kind of look to him.
Yeah.
As they were patrolling the skies of Tatooine, right? As one does. Now the Empire is gone.
Yep.
And she makes a comment too in the story about how short the Empire lasted, right? In terms of years.
Mm-hmm.
There's a point there. I forget what she said, like less than 50 years or something like that.
30 years, I think she said, for the Empire.
Yeah, I don't remember the number actually, but yeah, it wasn't very much, right? So
Yeah.
surprisingly. But she doesn't know about the New Order yet, though. We do. It's just going to last the whole 6 episodes, 6 years.
Can we just forget about that? Pretty please?
What?
Can we just forget about all that? Just please? Please, Cameron?
Maybe.
I saw a review of How I Met Your Father after lacing into it last week.
Yeah.
And
yeah. So I'm not going to watch it?
Oh, no, I'm not. But yeah, it got eviscerated. The people were like, it's also crap, so don't bother. I was like, oh, well, there you go.
Oh, really? Oh, good. Good call.
I did notice this week that I finished up those last 2 Marvel Netflix series and was like, okay, so what am I going to watch next? I was looking around some of my streaming services, trying to figure out what the next program I should watch is. And I noticed that a new series had dropped on Disney Plus here that was a Hulu branded series, and it was Hitmonkey. And I remember reading last year that Hitmonkey was coming. Hitmonkey is based on a Marvel comic. And I thought, oh, that's weird. I remember reading that was coming. It turns out they did exactly the same thing. They basically aired the entire season starting last fall in the United States on Hulu, and then just dropped it here in Canada all at once because it was done. It was already aired in the States. I was like, well, there's another one off the list. Screw you guys. Like, I honestly just don't understand the rationale, of putting stuff that far out of date from when it appears in its first run. Because America, I don't know. Like, it just seems so arbitrary.
I mean, I think you're looking from the wrong thing. I don't think it's like America holding this stuff back or any sort of weird stuff. I think it's Canadians deciding that they don't want to pony up for the licensing rights or something.
It's true, although again, it wouldn't make any sense for Disney Plus to license it that way anyways. Why wouldn't they just put it onto their streaming service as more exclusive content? Like, that's the part I don't understand. Why wouldn't you sort of day and date it the same way that you would any program from you're releasing on Hulu in the States? Why wouldn't you do that here? Because that way you're guaranteeing that people's eyes will be on your platform, so if they want to see it, they can get it there, as opposed to going to a secondary service or whatever else. To me, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I wonder if some of this is an artifact of... So let's separate out Disney Plus, which I think they have much more control over, and I'm going to hope is much more consistent across the various countries where it's available. Hulu, even though they do have controlling interest now with the pieces they picked up from Fox, was that weird sort of like consortium cabal of companies putting stuff together. So I wonder if it sort of fell into sort of the weird cracks between, like, when's Disney Plus actually going to ship? Could we put it on Hulu instead? Yeah, I guess we could. And nobody really thought enough to hold on to the rights and sort of avoid the weird Marvel Netflix series sort of thing that we're trying to bridge the gap on now, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's possible, but it nevertheless it is hard, given that this has been a long-standing trend, not to look at it and be like, this seems very specifically anti-Canadian. Now, maybe we I know I do get my back up about this, where it's just like, why would you release something just in the United States? Like, again, if you were putting it on broadcast television and your only opportunity to watch it was like tune in at 8:30 on Tuesday and you can watch it here. But once we went to a streaming world, that died. Like, that whole mentality just died. It's impossible. Once you put it on a streaming platform, the gloves are off. People will grab it and put it on other platforms. They will share it. They will do other things. The whole idea of like, well, now we're just going to air it on our streaming service, and therefore it's just in our market, just seems so, I don't know, absurdly naive.
Let me go away from the economic reasons why this might have happened, because that's what I sort of started with. And now I'm starting to wonder if there are government or regulatory reasons for some of this stuff. So obviously we want to focus on Canada, but I have noticed that for some of these properties, people in the UK and Australia tend to complain a lot. And I do happen to know that Australia is similar to Canada. I don't know about the UK, but it's similar to Canada in that it has imposed or is starting to impose locally grown and made content stuff on these providers of streaming, where it's like, should we release Hit Monkey in Canada? No, bro. We're at precisely 25% Canadian content. If we put this one show on there, we will be at 24.9%, and then we're going to get beat up by the regulators. Let's wait until we can buy a couple more Canadian shows to pad the numbers a little bit. Then we'll bring this over. Like, is it possible that something like that is taking part?
No, that's a very astute observation, though. Like, it's quite possible that there are some regulations in place. Although I know here in Canada, there's been a lot of debate over, can they regulate, Canadian content on these platforms? I don't know. It's tricky. It's a really tricky line to walk on some of this stuff. How you dictate that without rocking the boat and or costing your users an insane amount of money, where it's like, cool, there's more Canadian content on here. How much does it cost? Oh, forget that.
Well, I wonder, and I do believe it was, and again, I'm not in that country or other countries that are doing this, sort of uniquely privileged in that American content and culture tends to be pretty dominant throughout the globe. Right. So we don't encounter this. There's no like, oh my God, I'm watching Netflix. So it's like, what's with all this other non-American produced content? It's like, oh, cool. They got a bunch of shows from Korea. Great. Oh, they got a bunch of shows from India. That's cool. It's not going to overwhelm the vast swath of American originated and focused content. So I totally get that it might be a well-intentioned but potentially misguided implementation of what they're trying to do, which is, I think, avoid losing out on your own national culture's content, right? Like, when you're Canada size, when you're Australia size, or even the UK size, you're pretty easy to get overwhelmed by the massive amount of stuff that the Americans can produce. So I wonder, though, if there won't be the effect of not necessarily increasing costs for things like this, like, oh, it costs extra money to get, let's say, Canadian content just to slap it on there into Canadian Netflix. I might actually be more worried about junky, crappy, and very cheap and inexpensive content just being thrown in there as like, hey, was a Canadian involved in this? Great, it qualifies. Throw it in there. It costs us a nickel to buy the rights.
You've also hit on the hallmark, which is unfortunate, and I know I'm going to get some flack for this, but that is the hallmark of Canadian television, is that it also, there is some good quality Canadian television. Again, Schitt's Creek was a Canadian television program. There are some great Canadian television programs. But there's a bit of a stigma even within Canada of like, when you're watching a Canadian program, because the quality / production value / caliber of acting or whatever can sometimes be a little bit less than. And so it is almost kind of a running joke here where you're like, was this a Canadian show? Like, you kind of know it when you see it. So,
yeah, I guess it depends. You definitely want to push not only for having those sort of content minimums, just to make sure there is at least some chance of maintaining national identity and culture, but I think it'd be great for you all to really push on the and then here's some minimum bar of like, you got to have, some percentage of your shows have definitely got to win some Emmys or Golden Globes or some, or Rotten Tomatoes rating above 75 or something, just to get like something other than other garbage. Otherwise, people will game it, right? Netflix is incentivized to just check the legal box in Australia and Canada, and that's not what you want to see. What you want to see is make sure the entire world is not driven by American culture. Make sure that as you mentioned, in a streaming internet connected world, why can't we have the entire world's content come out at the same time?
Yep.
Why not? What's wrong with that? If I want to watch something from like, I don't know, Zimbabwe or something, there's a really cool Zimbabwe drama series, I should be able to watch it.
Yep. Oh, and again, you're right. Some of it is just, it's about partnerships because, who paid for the development of the show, and then who actually, how much do you pay for licensing and yada, yada, yada. I mean, it's tricky. I think there's a lot of value in having, national content on channels that are available in your area, but I don't know that that's the reason to, delay the release of other products across all these other places too. Like to me, it just becomes, again, just like I say, naive. Like, do they think that if someone really is like, I have read the Hit Monkey comic book, I love it. Oh, it's not coming to Canada for another X number of months, but it's already available here. I'll just wait. Like, that just seems shockingly naive.
Yeah, it's so weird when you have such cultural similarity that you share the language, and it's not like taking it to something that's less common of a problem, given that there are things like Crunchyroll that exist to have Japanese animation, if not day of, like a week later from broadcast in Japanese, and it's translated in at least subtitles, even for cultural translation, not just literally translating what are the words they're saying. Historically, it's like, oh, it's going to take time because we're going to have to take some effort of like, is this show worth spending the money? Can we, translate this? How do we distribute, and etc. But at least there was that barrier of like, oh, kind of not a big deal to worry about too much piracy or any sort of things on this, given that it will be hard for non-native Japanese speakers to even understand this. When it comes to American content not being available in Canada, it's like, bro, like all 30-some million people have at least a passing familiarity with English when it comes to that. There's no natural barrier there or obstacle. So why not just release it?
Yeah.
It's very, very strange. So I was going to pick an example that would probably piss off too many Canadians. So instead, I'm going to turn internally and anger one of the 50 states. But for people who are listening who are from the great state of Georgia, bear with me till I finish the example. So I think there isn't necessarily something wrong with trying to drive the content minimums. I think there should be investment locally to try to get that going. And I will point out that, like, I'm going to assume that it's been long enough for productions to be done in the state of Georgia that Georgians are probably getting really good at doing, movie and TV production type stuff. But did all of that stuff collect there because Georgians were sort of like naturally good at that stuff? No, they did it because they were cheap, right? Yeah. They were tax breaks. Yeah. So you knew where I was going with this. Oh yeah. But eventually you collect so much of the groundswell of that you start becoming the experts, and you start having that next generational stuff of like, you can't do it, right across the way in like Texas, because why would we do that? Why don't we just have people do it in Georgia? That's where all the experts are. Yep. So I think Canada should probably try to do the same thing of like, cool, not only have those minimum things, but also, I don't know how this is financed through like taxes or grants or something, just like building up we're going to put stuff on the streaming platforms that has been intentionally produced to be good quality content coming out of your country.
Yeah. It's funny, now that you mentioned, I wonder, because there is so much production that happens up here. Again, all the Star Trek live action stuff is filmed up here. I wonder, for Canadian content purposes, if it falls under that umbrella of, that qualifies, it was made here, Like, to be fair, and Tim and I probably noticed this more so than you would, Jaime, just because of being Canadian, but there has been a huge noticeable number of the supporting actors on the Star Trek series like Disco and Picard who are Canadian. They're really easy to spot. You're like, oh, that person was on this CBC program. That person was on this, Canadian project for years. It may not resonate for you in the same way. You might be like, oh, that's a familiar face. I've probably seen them before. And, good actors are good actors. Good actors are going to be on lots of different things. But I constantly like, oh, I know that face. Where do I know that face from? Oh, it was from this, CBC program from a few years back. Oh, where do I know that person? Oh, they were clearly on, it becomes pretty, pretty familiar. So again, I think part of the reason is that part of the rule that they have in place is, cool, you're going to film here. Oh, okay. Also, you have to employ a certain number of Canadians in order to qualify for all your tax incentives and everything else, right?
Mm-hmm. And sometimes I myself personally benefit from this. So you may or may not know that the Chucky TV series was filmed, you could probably guess, in Toronto. And since I've joked on Disco at Lieutenant Tax Break, right? Yes. I was like, that's probably why that character's there, that actress is there. But even if they go the we got to find a Canadian actress route, I happen to personally benefit as a longtime unreasonable, irrational fan of Lexa Doig because she is in the Chucky TV series.
Yes, that's true. If you wanted to see Lexa Doig, she does fill a quota.
That's the kind of win-win scenario we need.
What's
in
the
this
opposite
crazy
of a
international
Kobayashi
world
Maru?
of tax rates? A no-lose scenario. No matter what you do, it comes out like
the
like
Alexa
sunshine.
Doig scenario. Yeah. Computer, call it the Alexa Doig scenario.
There you go, Tim. That's the title of the episode, the Lexa Doig scenario.
I love it. That's funny. Yep. Well, again, it's just so funny. I mean, it's hard to get yourself excited where we live in a monoculture to a certain extent, especially if you spend an amount of time on social channels. Social channels are the great unifier. We aren't Canadians and Americans and Brits and Australians all speaking the same language. We're also monoculturally interested in Star Trek writ large, Marvel Universe writ large, Star Trek writ large, all these things that cross over across our experiences and unify us. And that's kind of an awesome thing. So you get people sharing conversations and starting message boards and starting conversation places. And that's excellent. So when you see these things where you're like, oh, I see on this, person that I follow is excited about seeing this new program, you get excited about it. Oh, cool. I like that actor. I like that performer. I like that circumstance, whatever it is. To be told you can't have it again, I think the ultimate one is the one we talked about at the beginning of the season where Discovery got canceled off of all of the non-North American streaming services and was just like, oh, by the way, you can't have it. If you found yourself in that circumstance, I'm not suggesting you would do anything illegal, but would you be inclined to take that lying down if they were like, hey, you know how it's supposed to be a new season of one of your favorite series is supposed to start in 2 days? Yeah, you can't watch that for another 3 months or an indeterminate period of time. That it leaves a bad taste in your mouth, and it's just kind of confusing that they think that is going to stop people.
It is, and that's why we joke about like, oh, these episodes fell off the back of a truck. I guess I might as well watch them.
Yeah, like, I don't know. It's so strange. And the same thing, like right now, there are avenues that you could watch these things. There are avenues that you could, so far there hasn't been anything like, again, How I Met Your Father seemed like an interesting idea, a premise based on a show that I enjoyed, and I probably would have watched it. Now I'm pissed off, so I'm not going to watch it. Hit Monkey, again, a funny idea for a comic book. I'm sure it's a funny idea for a TV program. I'm not dying to see it, but it's also one of those things where I'm like, hey, screw you. Like, why? Why'd you do this? But yeah, if it was something extreme, if there was like, again, for the sake of argument, if they were like, hey, Disney Plus has decided they're only going to put out Book of Boba Fett for an American audience, and 3 months later you'll get it in other markets. I don't know that I would be as patient.
Yeah, I do feel like there needs to be a town hall with all of these execs that sort of deal with stuff, and then you just go up to do your presentation, and all your presentation is the Futurama "shut up and take my money" meme just repeating in the background for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Of like, do you get it? Shut up and take my money. Just give it to me. Just offer it to me so I can actually pay you for this.
Yeah. I don't know. I wonder, it's funny, we talked, Tim had mentioned in the last episode that, the decision to raise the rates for Netflix, along with the quality influx in some of the other services, may have started to see a decline in the ubiquitousness of Netflix, that people are actually like, maybe I don't need Netflix. We talk about voting with your dollars if you feel like you're not getting what you need. The problem is that, you're cutting off your nose to spite your face at some points on some of these things too, where you're like, oh, I can't believe they did this. I'm going to give up my, Disney Plus subscription. And they're like, well, okay, more power to you, fool. Yeah.
It's hard to do that, and arguably gets to a different, how much power is too much power for some of these conglomerates.
Yeah.
Of should they have this much content, or should Marvel and Star Wars be broken apart into some other services and etc. It gets really challenging now.
Jaime, don't give them ideas, my friend. Don't give them ideas. You just give them an idea. They're like, what if we just did Star Wars Plus? What if we just did Marvel Plus?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you end up with, a crappy pricing model if you bought them all separately. And then they're like, but if you got the Disney Plus bundle, you save like $2 a month. Oh, okay. And effectively the same situation is there, but legally they've satisfied the Congress, from the American side, the Congress's thirst for breaking up, big media and big tech.
Yeah. Yep. I think the reality is that if you are a fan of, the sort of sci-fi pop culture stuff that we're into, you are likely never going to give up your subscription to Disney Plus anymore, ever again. You're in it. You're in it. That's all there is to it. There really is no way out, unless you just say to hell with it. Honestly, it's the same deal they have with cable television and sports at this point. Perhaps there will come a tipping point where somebody like Amazon or Apple will get into the game and say, hey, we're buying the rights to this. If you want this, you have to have a subscription to our service. And I honestly feel like that. I'm surprised that hasn't happened yet. But at the same time, I think, until that moment happens, you're kind of on the hook. If you're a sports fan, you kind of have to have cable television or some variation. You can watch it, online and stuff, but it's spotty and challenging. And, I know people who have tried to do it and have, had less than ideal luck on that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, well. Who needs you, hip monkey? Hulu.
All right, let's move on to our watch list. And Jonathan, you're up first. Speaking of things to forget about.
Yeah, so I checked on the new season of South Park is starting on February 2nd on Comedy Central in the States, much here in Canada. After these two sort of mini movie things that they did for Paramount Plus, which are, to the best of my knowledge, still only available on Disney Plus, or not Disney Plus, excuse me, Paramount Plus. So it's kind of interesting that they're going back to the, where they started from. They're back on Comedy Central. It's kind of disappointing as a fan. I have not watched those two movies. It's kind of, I hope that there's no sort of connection, but I'm disappointed that I haven't had a chance to watch those yet. I suppose I could, do the Lopez calculus and get a month of free or a week of free Disney or Paramount Plus to try and, cram those in and find out what happens. But it is, it's never a bad thing to get more South Park on TV. So I'll tune in and see if there's any sort of immediate need for me to go back and connect those things.
Cool. All right. Well, as the show's been going on, I found more and more stuff. But the first thing I want to talk about is Resident Alien, which just came back out again yesterday for its second season premiere. And I don't know if you guys remember, but Nathan Fillion tweeted this morning that he's in this trailer that I've got here, the season trailer, or the season 2 trailer. I'll have a link in the show notes. And yeah, I don't know if you guys remember Nathan Fillion. Like, this is Alan Tudyk's show, obviously. Yep. He's, everybody's favorite droid K2SO. And he also played the pilot Wash in Firefly. So, of course, all the Firefly people have to show up at some point. But Nathan Fillion was in last season's episode. I don't know if you remember for the character I told you he played.
Yeah, I don't recall.
Have you watched any of these Resident Alien things?
I haven't. Is this a Hulu property, I think?
It is.
Yeah.
Sci-fi.
Yeah, I think so.
Sci-fi.
Yeah. It's a Sci-Fi Channel, yeah. It's pretty cool. Yeah, so he plays an alien who makes himself look like a human. He's here to destroy the Earth, basically. But he befriends a kid, and madness and goes on. But he's in a seafood restaurant, and the octopus in the tank starts talking to him because they're both kindred spirits, like they're both descendant from the same species. And the octopus in the tank is played by Nathan Fillion.
That's funny.
And guess what? I started watching The Expanse season. I thought I was caught up, but apparently I missed season 5. So I'm catching up on season 5 and 6. So The Expanse, if you might remember, Dark Matter and The Expanse were both on around TV around the same time. They both got unceremoniously canceled. And fortunately for The Expanse and not so much for Dark Matter, The Expanse got picked up by Netflix and they put out a season 4. And then now they've put out a season 5, and now they just released season 6. So I got to catch up on season 5 before I watch season 6. So really interesting story. It's different kind of sci-fi, a little bit more refreshing, a little bit like Babylon 5 in some senses, but not quite as bad. And
harsh.
Friend of the show, Tammy Coron, pointed out today that there's a to go along with the, when you wonder what has Dr. Beverly Crusher been up to? Well, it turns out that Gates McFadden has been doing a podcast on your various podcast shows called Gates McFadden Investigates. Who do you think you are? And the guests that she has on the show are some, strange people like Michael Dorn and Denise Crosby and Robert Picardo. So I get a sort of sense that Michael Westmore, I don't know who that is. But and there's also a promo. Last episode was a promo for the Center Seat, so which I've been talking about for the last little while too. So I'm going to check out some of these shows to see what's going on with those. Those are on your favorite podcaster. And since we were talking about some of the backstory of The Mandalorian, just after this episode was over, Disney decided to show me the Beneath the Mask magazine episode that they have on Disney Plus, which covers the sort of Boba Fett, who started out as there was going to be a whole army of Boba Fetts. Apparently they were white, and apparently from a collector's point of view, if you find a white Boba Fett, that's an actual maquette from that original series. George decided he didn't have enough budget to make an entire army of them. So one of the effects guys went and basically distressed it and painted it silver and made it with a green tint over the top and invented the character Boba Fett, who I think had 4 lines in the original series of movies.
Yep.
Very menacing, and that's what I've always liked about Boba Fett. He was a bit of a badass, right? From that point of view, you didn't know anything about him at all. And that sort of talks about the origin of that. But he also talks about the young kid that played Boba Fett, because Jango Fett, Tamora Morrison plays Jango Fett in Attack of the Clones. And I don't know if he's in the second movie. I guess he must be in the second movie. But he's basically the clones, right? He's the adult model that they made the clones from. But Boba Fett, if you don't know, was a clone that was made specially for him in terms of payment, but unmodified. So they just have a normal life. So the young actor who plays Boba Fett in the movies is now, obviously a young man. He talks about the whole relationship that he had with Morrison, and how he just sort of said, I'll call you son and you call me dad, and that's the kind of bond that they ended up having as actors. So it's sort of interesting sort of story there behind the whole sort of making of Boba Fett and where he came from and all that kind of stuff, and the character, and of course the young kid got to play and was modeled and got to play the young clones in all of the what is it called, the Clone Wars? Yeah, so that's kind of cool. And I guess I have to look up his name now.
Daniel Logan.
While I throw, sorry,
Daniel Logan.
Daniel Logan. Thank you very much. And we'll throw over to Jaime for his thing.
Yeah, this is not new. These came out somewhere between 5 to 10 years ago, I think. But it's new to me, and the YouTube algorithm suggested it to me. There apparently were some animated shorts from the DC Nation block on Cartoon Network called Tales of Metropolis. And the collection of them, the entire collection, is a breezy 4 minutes and 22 seconds. They're fun. They're kind of lighthearted takes on Batman with Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, and Bizarro, which I think is pretty well done here. Have you guys ever seen these before? This was 100% new to me. I assumed it was some new thing.
Yeah, it didn't ring a bell when I saw it, so yeah, I must have missed that one.
No, I don't think I've seen them either. So
yeah,
first.
Yeah, they're nice, and I think they've got somebody in the comments says that it was Kevin Conroy that does Batman for that one.
Yeah, cool.
So kind of neat.
Oh, all right. Well, I guess that's it for another week. So I guess people want to get in touch with you, Jonathan, wherever they find you.
Always find me on Twitter and Instagram. It's @JPK News.
And Jaime, if people want to get in touch with you,
I'm on Twitter as @DevWithAHair.
All right. And my name is Timitra, TIMMITRA. On the Twitter machine is where you'll find me. And so until next time, we'll see you in the future. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
You've been listening to the Spotcast podcast. If you want to find out more about the podcast or see the episode show notes, visit the Spotcast website at spotcast.com. You can get in touch with us on the website or follow us on Twitter at Spotcast. If you have feedback or questions, send us a tweet with the hashtag AskSpotcast. If you like the show, please consider recommending us to a friend, writing a review on iTunes, or pledging any amount at patreon.com/Spotcast. You can find details on how to help us on our website, spotcast.com/sponsor us. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the future.
Adios. Sayonara.
Auf Wiedersehen.
That's it. Auf Wiedersehen, yes. Yep.
Auf Wiedersehen sounds really ugly, but what it means is until I see you again. It's such a lovely sentiment.
Mm-hmm.
It's like au revoir. Au revoir is such a nice one. Until I see you again.
Mm-hmm. Mañana. What they say in Spanish. Espanol, I think.
Hasta mañana? Till tomorrow?
No, mañana. Mañana is tomorrow.
Yeah. But isn't that hasta mañana?
Maybe, I don't know. We have, so we haven't already speaking Spanish-speaking people.
I know, it's a shame.
I am not the right person for the hasta mañana, hasta luego. I guess people would probably say both. Either one is fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
It's kind of depends on what you meant. Mañana would be more specifically tomorrow, whereas luego is next time or soon. It's more indefinite.
I think we used to say it at work because we were literally going to see the person tomorrow, you know?
Mm-hmm. So that
Back
makes
in the
sense
day,
for every
when-
day except Friday, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. Yeah. Well, you know, I started a 3D print earlier today, and then I realized it was going to take 6 hours, and it was going to cut into our podcast time, so I had to stop the print. So guess what I'm going to do after this call's over?
Last week's episode, we somehow didn't mention your 3D printer as an attack vector for assassins, which I feel like is a miss based on what happened in Prodigy last week.
They can send you a giant robot to come and attack you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but luckily it'll just be made of like filament and you could just like blow hard and it'll fall over. So
That's why in this movie it's smart enough to, like, you know, break an arm, you know, on the table or something. It's like, oh, it's jagged and sharp. No, get away, get away.
What's that line from The Simpsons? Oh no, he's got a board with a nail in it.
Yeah, for the Halloween's treehouse ones. Yeah, treehouse horror.
Soon they'll make bigger boards with bigger nails.
This is cool. Some German companies come up with an iPad dock that looks like an old retro 90s computer, like a 90s Mac.
Oh, that's pretty neat to do that. Like an iMac, Bondi Blue kind of Mac.
No, even older than that, like the old LC style.
Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
Rainbow style. I just stumbled across it. Don't even know if it's like a recent article.
And accidentally bought one.
German, so it's hard to read. Huh?
I just stumbled across it and accidentally bought one.
Yeah, it says Arkelvom 300516. So this is from 2016, I guess, right? But it's got an iPad Pro on it, so it's pretty recent. Huh.
Depends which one. The Pros are, I think, like I have a Pro and it's getting long.
Yeah, they started in 2015, right? The Pros. Here, I'll paste it in the link in the or Twitter Zoom chat so you can see it. Which tool should I use? Let's do this one. Chat, paste, return. There you go.
Oh, the Zoom chat.
Like a retro.
Okay.
I have like a retro Pinterest page that shows me all these sort of cool things people do. Like it shows me actual old computers, but it also shows me what people are doing with the current stuff. Like a Kleenex holder made out of an old, the G4 Cube.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Always looked like a Kleenex holder anyways, right?
Yeah, it did, yeah.
Oh, PSA, if you haven't updated your iOS and macOS devices, you really should, because the patches are for some really scary stuff, like visit the wrong web link and get owned sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got an alert from our InfoSec team today saying, go now. Go now.
You
do not pass
Mac
go.
People,
Please install this on your new on your devices ASAP, because our we have our access to our systems through our phones too. So they're like, please do not Trojan horse us anything. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I still run some old Macs here, so that's kind of a challenge.
That would explain why. So our IT at work, I think they had some troubles with Big Sur, so it sort of took a while. So I want to say it was like 3 months ago we got the go ahead to actually use Big Sur, and here we are, just a short 3 months later. It's like, oh, by the way, you're approved. You're all approved to get Monterey. I'm like, really? That's kind of fast. Oh, because they probably knew about this.
Yeah,
I mean, baseless speculation, but it seems like kind of soon-ish to have.
Why is there a current exploit that needs Monterey?
I guess that's true. I guess you don't necessarily need it. I think there are new security patches for. I think it might go as far back as Catalina.
I just updated both of my Macs that I work on to Monterey, but Carol is still on Big Sur.
Yeah, you might want to check. I think there might be patches as far back as Catalina, but I don't know. For me, for my personal laptop, I updated to Monterey and did my work one to Monterey, and then got my everything, my iPad, my iPhone, my Apple Watch, and my HomePod all needed updating.
Yeah.
But I guess at least working from home, it's kind of easy to update that stuff while you're otherwise in meetings or doing documentation or something.
Yeah. I mean, they always say stability and performance, but like, was there something specific?
Yeah, I'm not a security expert, but I did see the series of things that you could get hit from, I think, just if you used Safari, which is kind of the you have no choice kind of option on iOS, given that Safari's engine is underneath the covers, even for third-party browsers. I don't know that it impacted Chrome on desktop. So for me as a Chrome user, I hypothetically didn't need to worry, but what if I accidentally fire up Safari? Or what if I need to fire up Safari? Like I said, it's just not worth the whole for my personal stuff. And then for my work stuff, for some of these critical things, move pretty fast. Of like, you will lose access to critical resources if you do not update as part of our policy. Like Teams on my phone, I'm surprised it hasn't given me the little nastygram saying like, hey, by the way, you need to update to this version. Maybe because I already have. So it elegantly avoids the nastygram, but it didn't used to do that before.
Somebody's painted a SE30 with like lavender Mac, flower power. Anyway, time to say goodbye.
All right.
Goodbye.
Until next time.
All right.
A bientôt. It would be me then, I guess.